Hello and welcome to the Armenian News Network Grung. In this Conversations on Grung episode, we're going to discuss with our guests Armenia's foreign policy prospects in the new geopolitical context in the aftermath of the 2020 Artsakh war. This episode was recorded on Wednesday, July 21st, 2021. On June 20th, Armenia's election resulted in the re-election of Nikol Pashinyan and his civil contract party. Meanwhile, tension in foreign affairs continued between Moscow and Ankara. What are the foreign policy prospects for Armenia and Artsakh in the new geopolitical context? To help us unpack the current situation and the broader regional context, we are joined by Dr. Pietro Shakarian, who is a lecturer in Armenian history at the American University of Armenia in Yerevan. His focus is the Soviet-era Armenian history, especially the era of de-Stalinization and Nikita Khrushchev's thaw. He has written analyses on Russia and the post-Soviet space for various publications, including The Nation, Hetk, and more. And we also have with us Yeghia Tashjian, who is a regional analyst and researcher based in Beirut with expertise in China, Iran, and the Persian Gulf. Tashjian is the regional officer of Women in War, a gender-based think tank, a columnist for the Armenian Weekly, and hosts a monthly radio program called Turkey Today. Hello and welcome, gentlemen.
Aliyev, hello.
Asbed. Hello, everyone.
Hello. Okay, let's start with a more global context for understanding where the conflict in the South Caucasus sits in the larger regional and superpower geopolitical shuffling. Pietro, we were talking before the conversation. Can you give us a little bit of a context for the entire southern flank of the former Soviet Union?
Oh, well, the entire southern flank of the former Soviet Union, which is basically Russia's borderlands, is kind of on fire right now. I mean, you have a whole kind of arc of conflict and instability from Kiev to Kabul, as they say, with NATO-supported conflicts all around Russia's parameters. One of the most explosive incidents that happened recently were the NATO exercises, actually in early July, in which Turkey was a participant in the Black Sea region. So now the Black Sea basin is a major strategic area for Russia. It has the Black Sea naval fleet in Crimea. Sochi is there. So it is a major area of strategic significance for Russia, and the presence of the NATO forces in that area doing exercises was very alarming to the Russians. They did air exercises actually in response to that. So what you have is kind of escalating tension all kind of around that border. You also have, now if we go look at Artsakh, we're looking at Armenia and Azerbaijan, this whole area. Azerbaijan is building up on the borders. We're going to talk about that a little bit more later today, but they're building up around the borders of Armenia and in Karabakh. Aliyev is making a lot of provocative statements. Turkey is there supporting them to the hilt, so you have that. Also kind of going back even to the Black Sea thing, Russia has continued problems with Ukraine, tensions in that whole area, and Putin even did an op-ed appealing to the Ukrainian people recently, over the head of the Ukrainian government.
Yes.
So that was another recent episode as well too. But it's really a mess. Russia really has a lot of problems to take care of, and Artsakh is part of that context as well.
Yeghia, what are your thoughts about the current situation that Russia finds itself in?
I totally agree. What Pedro said, and also just to add that today it was announced that in Georgia, the Americans and also the NATO partners are going to conduct military exercises. Azerbaijan was also going to participate. Even Ukraine was going to participate, in addition to Germany, Turkey, and UK. So this is a direct message from the NATO to the Russians that they are trying to squeeze the Russians at best. We have, for example, now South Caucasus. For the first time, NATO has a military presence de facto through the Turks. NATO advises us also in Ukraine. And also with the withdrawal of the Americans, Turkey, it seems that it is insisting to take control over the Kabul airport. So NATO is trying to squeeze the Russians, at least from three sides, I can say.
Yeah, and also, something else that Russia really has an issue because this area of the Caucasus, I mean, the American War Party wanted to get in there to help kind of undermine kind of Russian energy interests, to kind of create a pipeline that went from Turkey that went from Europe to Turkey and then through Georgia and Azerbaijan into Central Asia, potentially. That's what they're looking at. So there's that too.
Definitely. I mean, I don't know if we remember that in 2008 and before there was this Nabucco pipeline. That
Yes.
it was actually funded or initiated by George W. Bush, I think, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
And this was also one of the things that were the dominant effect behind the Armenian-Turkish protocols, because they were pushing that if the Armenians wanted this pipeline to pass from Armenia, that the Armenian side was going to compromise on Artsakh. So the pipeline politics is also important, and I mean, there are many analysts actually arguing that what happened in Artsakh and the outcome is definitely related to the energy politics in South Caucasus and even beyond.
And also, Turkey again is playing a big leadership role. So, if like you have people, factions in the Moscow foreign policy elite who might be looking, maybe we can be like a partner with Turkey, maybe we can work with Turkey. Well, I mean, look at they're participating. I mean, you mentioned they're participating in these planned NATO exercises that are moving forward in Georgia.
Yeah.
They were participants in the Black Sea exercises. So Turkey, and also we have the factor of their presence in Afghanistan. And their recent cooperation selling drones to Ukraine. I mean, all over the place.
So
Turkey is
actually,
not.
that is a question I want to ask. As the Kabul airport is now in Turkey's control, I wanted to ask you about what the implications are for Russia and Iran. I mean, Afghanistan has long been a part of the cultural world of Greater Iran, right? So
Yes.
by filling in for NATO, is Turkey joining the U.S.-led effort to contain Iran? Is Ankara provoking Iran in its backyard, or what's your view on this?
Well, I think that if we're looking at it, this is a very serious matter because, again, Afghanistan is, like we say, the kind of part of that Iranian cultural world. And I think that the calculus on the part of the, American forces may be that, look, if we pull out, we want somebody to come in who can kind of secure our interests, and we want to make sure that, say, Tehran or also, Pakistan, they don't fill in the void, so that we can have somebody here who we can count on. So maybe there was a possibility that they brought in Turkey to kind of help fill that void as well, too. But I can't imagine Iran, would react very well to this scenario of a new Turkish presence in Afghanistan.
What is Russia's reaction? So far, it's been very quiet.
Russia's reaction has been quiet so far, but I've also heard, through my channels that the Russians are not very happy about this scenario, because this is very close to Central Asia. It gives the Turks kind of a vantage point into Central Asia. It's right on the border with Tajikistan. And there's actually been some concern recently with Tajikistan that they've been concerned about with the Taliban in Afghanistan. So there is that aspect as well, too. I mean, suddenly Turkey now has a presence right on the doorstep of Central Asia. And that's Russia's backyard. I mean, basically, the Russians see that as their backyard. So, I mean, Turkey now is expanding slowly but surely its influence all across that Russian perimeter of Eurasia. And that's a big concern.
Yeah. Is this going to become a new Russo-Iranian alliance on this theater?
Hopefully, yes, because this is definitely in the interest of the Armenians. But the question is whether the Armenians are ready or not. But also coming, to add, make quick notes about the Afghanistan issue. Today, there was, I think 2 days ago, there was an article in the National Interest. And the author was talking about the possible American and Russian cooperation in Afghanistan, but also in Central Asia. It means that the Americans also, they want to deep penetrate into Central Asia, because for them this is important, because according to the author, he had this idea that maybe the Americans can cooperate with the Russians in order to contain the Chinese influence. Something which I assume that it is a bit difficult at this moment, because the Russians and the Chinese, they have quite a lot of common interests. Also, there was announcement today by the Russians saying that they are not happy, but at least they think that they are safe, that the Taliban is now controlling the border areas with Central Asia, because they are afraid that the alternative would be ISIS, because in these areas there is now an anarchy situation. The government is not controlling the border with Central Asia. There are two powers, basically. The first is the Taliban, which is, I can say, like a nationalist Islamist movement. And the second is the Qaeda or the ISIS, which is worse. Coming to Taliban, Taliban is not a transnational movement. That is why they went, the delegation of Taliban went to Moscow, and they said to the Russian that we don't have any interest in Central Asia. But ISIS or the Al-Qaeda, they are transnational terrorist organization. So they are not just a headache for the Russians, but also for the Chinese and even for the Indians. I mean, the Indians completely now lost the leverage on Afghanistan now with the coming of Taliban. So I think the Russians, they will try to maneuver maybe with the Chinese, because China has a good relations with the Pakistan, and Pakistan intelligence, they have a leverage, or the Taliban. So I think the Russians will try to maneuver and see what they can do. I mean, and prepare for the worst situation.
I want to mention also about what you mentioned about that article in the National Interest. There is a faction in the American foreign policy elite that actually believes if we have a rapprochement with Moscow, we can use that to kind of contain the Chinese influence.
This is what Henry Kissinger said.
Yes, exactly. But again, it's questionable to what extent Russia will be willing to abandon that relationship with China. There are some Russians, by the way, who actually are interested in this idea, but in general, in the Russian elite, it's not, a dominant way of thinking, because the relationship with China right now is, as you say, very good. And also, it's not clear, even in the U.S., if this idea would go only so far, because right now the attitude toward Russia in the U.S. foreign policy elite is very hostile. Although there is that, like you say, that strain to cooperate.
Yeah. So as far as Turkey is concerned, it's almost become a cliche to say that Erdogan is pursuing neo-Ottoman imperial dreams in the Middle East, the Caucasus, Central Asia. Sure, Erdogan is emboldened by the success of the Turkish drones in Libya and Artsakh, but how realistic is a new Ottoman Empire from Tripoli to Tajikistan? Pietro?
I don't think it is realistic or sustainable for a Turkish state that right now has serious economic problems, and they also have even continued domestic problems. Erdogan still is cracking down on dissent. He still feels like he needs to secure himself even more than he already is. And so I think a lot of this is kind of like posturing to, how do I say this, to distract from the domestic problems. But the domestic problems are there, and, they're not going to go away anytime soon, so he can try doing something like this. But I think that there will be he is making a bid to expand Turkey's regional influence, but I'm not sure how far it will go, and I'm not sure if Turkey has the resources to take it as far as he would like.
Yeah, your thoughts?
I totally agree, because Turkey does not have even the financial resources. And also Central Asia and Afghanistan is definitely at the backyard of the Chinese, so Turkey is not ready to clash with the Chinese, especially that it is in dire need for Chinese investments. There were rumors actually and reports from Syria that Turkey was sending or thinking to send Syrian mercenaries to Afghanistan. That can be like an alternative to the Turks in order to secure the Kabul airport, because I don't think that the Turks are ready to see coffins coming from Afghanistan to Turkey, and the Turks to send their sons to Afghanistan, because it's a useless war to them. The interesting question is that what Turkey is gaining from this. I don't have the answer. Okay, Afghanistan, there are a lot of mineral resources, there is a uranium, but just controlling the Kabul airport. I clearly do not have this answer. Especially that Taliban, Pakistan, which is like ally of Turkey, has good relations with Taliban. Same also with Qatar. But it seems that the Pakistani and the Turkish interests are going to clash in Afghanistan.
In Afghanistan, yeah.
Yeah, this is very interesting. So, yeah.
I put it in the context of containing Russia. It was a very post-Soviet kind of a thinking for the NATO countries in the 90s and approximately the year 2000, when they advanced the NATO lines all the way to the borders of Russia. And this basically also comes right on the border of the CSTO / the former Soviet Union.
His effort to contain the Russia, it's very dangerous too, because I mean, we mentioned in the last time I was on Groom that Russia has a large nuclear arsenal, and can you imagine? NATO, of course, is a large nuclear arsenal. Mm-hmm. So the idea of trying to confront Russia in like the Black Sea or Ukraine or Karabakh or in Georgia or any of these places, Central Asia, it's very, very potentially very dangerous. But also, I think to respond to what you were saying, Yeghia, about the situation with why is Turkey in Afghanistan, I think a lot of it also has to do with they want to kind of maybe have a foothold in that Central Asian region. I mean, that geographically, that puts them closer to places like, Tashkent or Dushanbe, these capitals of Central Asia. So maybe I think that is the calculus, but I think also I think it's not going to be something that they can sustain. And on top of it, the drones, that's another thing that they may be thinking, that because we were very successful with the drones in Artsakh, that we can really win any war, and we're invincible. They might have convinced themselves of this. And I think that they might be able to think that they can, win a conflict in Afghanistan.
Pietro, that's exactly what I thought. They have a new foothold and a place from where to operate their drone system.
Yeah, the main concern is that if there will be a war between Turkey and Taliban, so it means that the alternative of Taliban with the collapse of the central Afghani government will be ISIS. So that can be an alternative from the Turkish and the American point of view, like in order to give push to the ISIS, in order to infiltrate to Central Asia and impose more pressure to the Russians, and then we will end up like a Russian intervention in Afghanistan. So the 1980s scenario will be repeated. This is a very disastrous for the Russians, actually. I don't know if this is the secret plan, for example.
Yeah, well, let's see what happens. I mean, it would, I think, be a huge cost for the Americans to do something like that, but we'll see. I hope it's not the case, because for the United States, that would undermine American national security too, if they're going to be encouraging this kind of thing.
Yeghia, are the current economic woes in Turkey a cyclical phase, or are there systemic issues with the economy that are going to be a prolonged issue here for them?
I think for the time being, the more Erdogan is trying to expand, I mean, they are building bases in Africa, now maybe in Azerbaijan, we don't know, and other places. So the more they are expand, the more they are going to pay more money, so it needs more resources. And the Turkish economy is not doing well. I mean, the lira is fluctuating. The middle class of Turkey is not the same as the middle class of it was in the 2005, 2006, which is the peak of the middle class in Turkey. So they are facing a lot of challenges. And also they have problems with the European Union and the American sanctions after the S-400 anti-air missiles that they bought from the Russians. So Turkey is trying its best to maneuver between the West and Russia, but eventually they have to take side. Sometimes they are confronting the Russians, sometimes they are confronting the Europeans, especially when it comes to the Syrian refugees issue and so on. They are also now part in the Eastern Mediterranean conflict with the clash of the energy resources, especially with the oil and gas. So Turkey is everywhere. The problem is that they don't have a big financial resources to fund all these expenses.
So I'm going to ask you, Pietro, is Afghanistan going to be a new Turkish delight or a Turkish nightmare here?
I think it's going to be a new Turkish nightmare if they're there, if they get bogged down, because, look at the history of Afghanistan. Iran could not conquer Afghanistan. The British Empire could not conquer Afghanistan. Same thing with the Soviet Union. We know that they were in there for quite a bit. And the Americans now are the latest ones who were in Afghanistan. So I don't think Turkey, unless they really have convinced themselves, like I said, that their drones can win any war, that they can defeat any mountain people. They think that, we were successful maybe with against the Kurds or against Artsakh, so now we can use this in Afghanistan as well. But I don't think it's going to be successful for them.
Interesting. Okay, let's talk a little bit about Armenia's diplomatic woes. Foreign Minister Ara Ayvazyan resigned on May 31st, and in the week following, his deputy foreign ministers and the ministry spokeswoman, Anna Nardalyan, also all resigned. Only one deputy resignation was rejected, as well as Nardalyan's, so the ministry basically had enough manpower to turn the lights on and off during business hours. Most diplomatic decisions now go through the prime minister himself, personally, and we're not aware of any deeper processes in reaction to Armenia's foreign policy needs. Let's talk a little bit about this. Yeghia, what are your thoughts about why Foreign Minister Ayvazyan and all his deputies resigned? I remember that he said there were policy differences, but can you dig a little bit into that?
I believe there's a huge bureaucracy issue. That is, like when it comes to the foreign ministry and defense ministry, people are very bureaucratic there. There is a state policy. They have to follow whoever comes on the head of state. The problem is that the Pashinyan doesn't have any bureaucratic experience. He was just a journalist, more like we can say yellow journalist. He came and with his populist ideas, he wanted to mix everything up. You can do this in the Ministry of Economy, you can do this in the Ministry of Agriculture or the Tourism and so on, but you cannot do this in a very institutionalized ministry such as the Foreign Ministry and the Defense Ministry. So he's trying to do this. There is also a problem when it comes to the status of the Artsakh and Nagorno-Karabakh, also the border demarcation issue. It was clear that the Foreign Ministry, the staff, they were against the demarcation because definitely when you are trying to recognize the border of Azerbaijan, it means that de facto you are also recognizing that Artsakh is part of Azerbaijan. Correct. So this raises huge issues when it comes to Armenia's foreign policy.
Also, I would add to that too that Pashinyan is not an expert at all on foreign affairs. He does not understand the subtleties of foreign affairs. And this is somebody who thinks he can almost dictate to the foreign ministry what to do. And the reality is the foreign minister of Armenia and the foreign ministry itself, they know these issues intimately. They know best how to advance, the foreign interest, the interest of Armenia, the state interest of Armenia on the international stage. And so Pashinyan, instead of deferring to them by interfering in their ministry, I think that is something that creates a lot of resentment. Also, the moves he makes above them. So if you remember that with the November statement, where he signed it, the foreign minister wasn't even consulted. Then there are also these meetings where he's going, to meet with Aliyev, let's say, and then they might be agreeing on something and they don't consult the foreign minister. So how do you think, you're the foreign minister, how do you think that you feel about that? He's just going over the head of them. He's not even consulting with them. In some cases, he's, interfering with their work. Actually, in most cases, he's interfering with their work. So, if I were the foreign minister too, I'd want to resign. Because if you're working in that kind of environment where, first of all, the guy doesn't respect you, and he's not going to give you space to do your job. The same thing with what he did with the military during the war.
Well, it was definitely issues with the agreement in November that Manucharyan decided to leave the position. But let me turn the table around on this issue. There was a lot of criticism of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs upon the resignation of Ayvazyan and his deputies. They said basically that he is not towing the line, he's not serving Armenia's needs. What are your thoughts about how the Foreign Ministry should have handled the Prime Minister? Pietro?
It's difficult to say, and the reason why I say it's difficult to say is because if I were any foreign policy professional in Armenia, I don't think could really work with this man. This is somebody who is, very, very experienced in foreign affairs in Armenia. So is Manucharyan. And even before him, you could go back all the way to Nalbandian. These are men and women, by the way, who are very experienced in their craft. And the way in which Pashinyan approaches administration, the way in which Pashinyan approaches his executive duties, I don't think is very effective and very useful. So when we flip the tables around, how could the foreign ministry better have handled the situation? It's difficult to say because you have to look at the environment they're coming from. I mean, these are people who are professionals who, like Yeghia said there, these are people who are institutionalized professionals.
Yeghia, your thoughts on the mass resignation?
Also, let's not forget that the same happened in the NSS, that is the National Security Service. He just switched the directives almost 3 times, I think, during the war, which was like, it's too much. Because such institutions, especially institutions related to the security, they need stability in order to perform their acts and duties and so on. So you cannot just change the head of the institution whenever you want.
Right.
I agree fully. Yeah. And I think that instead, like, when we look at this June 20th election, even though it's strengthened maybe Pashinyan, the sense of political crisis is still there in Armenia, regardless. And I don't think that that's fully resolved, unfortunately.
No, not at all. So has the June 20 election strengthened the prime minister or prolonged Armenia's political crisis in this context? The area?
I think both. To some extent, it gave legitimacy to Pashinyan, saying that, the people will support me, so I'm right and I can do everything. At the same time, it will definitely prolong the conflict, because from the Azerbaijani perspective, Pashinyan is just like a weak person, so we can impose our will on him. The same is with the Russians, because they see Pashinyan as a weak person, so they can impose their will on him. As also we said a few minutes ago, that Pashinyan doesn't have any foreign policy experience, so he cannot maneuver, he cannot, for example, even during the war, he even didn't consult with the Iranians. So I don't see the future very bright under his rule.
I think also, if we're looking at, Russia's interest in this situation in Armenia, again, like, they would support Pashinyan only to such an extent, because if Pashinyan is doing things to undermine the Armenian state, if he's giving away territories, let's say, there's only so much more of Armenia is only so big, frankly, and there's only so much more you can give away. So it's not like you can keep on repeating, say, the Treaty of Kars scenario over and over and over, and then Armenia is left with nothing. Russia needs Armenia there. Russia, values Armenia as a strategic partner in a region where it has, where its influence has receded. You look at NATO has, installed itself in Georgia. Turkey is installing itself in Azerbaijan. So from the Russian point of view, to lose Armenia, in that context,
they need an Armenia there. Do they need an Armenian government there?
They do. They need an Armenian government that is cooperative, that represents that stands for Armenian state interests, and that knows how to work with Moscow. But Pashinyan, I don't know. He's not competent. He's not there. I could say maybe politically. He's just. Even though he might be there physically, he's just not there. In terms of what he should be doing, in terms of stepping up to the plate and representing Armenian interests. So that's a major challenge. Now, if Pashinyan is unable or unwilling to represent Armenian interests, there is a potential that Russia could step in and represent Armenian interests for Armenia. So, that's the kind of scenario we're looking at. And at that point, unfortunately, Armenia would be losing more sovereignty.
Do either of you discern a strategy in foreign policy and a method for navigating through the current state of affairs by the Armenian government, I mean to say?
I don't see much strategy on the part of the prime minister. If he is hoping, because we discussed this earlier, if he's hoping maybe that he could get some help from the West or something like that, I think that's a pipe dream.
Well, maybe they have installed the kind of people that they want, because, for example, the prime minister recently installed a deputy foreign minister, Armen Grigoryan, who was the national security chair, right? And he's very pro-Western.
He's very pro-Western, but you also have to think, but where's his experience? Where's his foreign policy experience? This is not a foreign policy professional at all.
He comes from NGO background. The problem is that what I'm really concerned that it seems that Armenia is becoming burden on Russia. Because everywhere you see the Russian troops on the border. Instead, you see that the Russians actually, they need these soldiers maybe in Ukraine, in somewhere else, and maybe in the future in Central Asia. So we think that the Russians are providing us the security, but at the same time, we should realize that we are becoming burden on them due to the mistakes when it comes to foreign policy the Armenia is making.
Just a couple of days ago, we were talking to Suren Sargsyan, who himself said, the CSTO, the Russians are essentially asking Armenia, you have to fight for yourself. Where are you on these borders? You want us to help you, we're willing, but you're not doing the job yourself.
Yeah, that's a huge thing. And actually, before this war, as a matter of fact, the Russians could, depend on Armenia to defend itself. And they could depend on Armenia even to defend itself in Artsakh. Artsakh was kind of like, the Russians almost, even though they didn't like not being there in terms of controlling that situation with the ceasefire violations, at least they knew the Armenians could more or less keep that situation under wraps.
Yeah,
but with what happened, But with what happened in the war, that balance of power was completely taken off kilter. So
So is Armenia making wise use of its alliances with the CSTO, with Russia? Are there any? What else?
I don't think so. Especially when it comes to other members of the CSTO, Belarus has excellent relations with Azerbaijan. They have also engaged in military agreements recently, and the other member states such as Kazakhstan, they have also good relations with Azerbaijan. The problem is that we always think that the others they have the responsibility or under duty to help us. We are the weaker side, so we should go and seek help, not the opposite. This is, I think, a type of Armenian syndrome that we always think that the angels will come and help us. We should seek the help, not the opposite side.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and also, the other thing, it comes down again, to this iron ladle idea. Armenia has to, to some extent, it has to, defend itself. It can't just depend on other people to do its business for it. And I think that's the dangerous mentality I'm seeing with Nikol Pashinyan. There is this tendency to think that we can rely on somebody to come in on a white horse and save the day. And that's a very dangerous mentality. And also it's also an anti-independence mentality, because Armenia needs to, one of the most valuable things Armenia has since 1991 is its independence, is the fact that there is an Armenian state. And if you're going to defer that to somebody else, you've lost it.
I've been afraid recently that we've taken it for granted that we have independence. Pietro, let's taking Armenia out of this for a second. What is the future of the CSTO itself? The CSTO itself has multiple issues lined up, including the latest, which is Afghanistan, right? Where do you think this organization is going?
I think this organization is still going to be with us. I don't foresee it collapsing or anything like that. By and large, you have to think most of the former Soviet states are allies of this organization. You are going to have issues, of course, with these areas of the post-Soviet space where there are countries that are actively opposed to Russian influence, right? Where NATO has a presence, like in the Black Sea basin with Georgia and Ukraine. But by and large, this is a pretty stable alliance of countries. And it again, like I said, it includes most of the post-Soviet states, and it's going to remain that way. But the question is, do the member states, will they be using this alliance effectively? And Armenia is a great case in point in that regard, because now you have an administration that's totally incompetent, that apparently does not value, defending itself. And so when you're in this situation, what is the development? And then this is why it comes down not so much to CSTO, but also to how does Armenia use CSTO? That's really what the bottom line is here.
Absolutely. I agree. Yeah.
I think eventually Turkey is doing its best in order to maybe destroy the CSTO internally.
Do you think it's Turkey, or is it NATO overall that's working on this?
NATO is also, for sure. NATO has a clear policy towards the CSTO. Mm-hmm. But Turkey is nowadays actively, maybe with the collaboration or the cooperation with the NATO, I don't know. But definitely because it is in their interest, because with the collapse of such a security organization in Central Asia, so definitely the Turks will penetrate easily the region. Also, when it comes to CSTO, I mean, it's just Russia usually. The others are, the investment that other countries are doing, it's very negligible, unlike NATO, for example. So when we say CSTO, we definitely mean just Russia.
Oh, I was just going to also say, too, that there might be a belief by Turkey, a desire to kind of infiltrate CSTO and kind of try and pry away some of the Central Asian republics from the post-Soviet, from the Russian sphere. But I don't think it's going to be a successful undertaking. And I also don't think Turkey really has a desire to destabilize these countries, but rather to put them in its sphere.
Right.
So I think that there may be that desire on the part of Erdogan to kind of create this pan-Turkic alliance of Central Asian states, but I don't think it's going to go that far. It's not going to have that much mileage.
Yeah, it's going to be very tough to create some kind of a Turkish union, a gigantic Turanian belt. All right, let's switch focus to Aliyev and his continuing love for his khakis and combat boots. Sevan, Yerevan, and Sunik, which Aliyev now calls West Zangezur, and probably most of the rest of Armenia, are on the Caspian Khan's latest wish list of territorial demands. These claims are backed up by the constant, and we mean daily, threats of force and Turkish declarations of support for them as well. Pietro, what are your thoughts on where Aliyev is going with all this? Is he trying to snatch another slice of Armenia proper, or is this for domestic consumption? What do you think?
I think that, unfortunately, I think that he sees the real possibility of actually trying to, take a part of Armenia proper. I think that actually he's emboldened by the Turkish support. I think the signs point to kind of a build-up along the borders, the frontiers of Armenia and Artsakh. And I think that there is this intention to not only retake the remainder of Artsakh, but also to potentially intervene in Armenia proper, to take maybe, parts of Sunik, if not the entirety of Sunik, and Lake Sevan and Yerevan. I mean, when he's saying that, not only is he saying we're going to take these areas, he's saying we're going to be there soon. That should be, a real red flag to the Armenian leadership. And it could also be that maybe he's hoping to provoke the Armenians into starting a conflict so he can take more territory or something like this. But I think that in general, there seems to be a plan, a calculus on the part of Aliyev and Erdogan supporting Aliyev, to launch a new war, new hostilities in Karabakh, and to really kind of lay down the gauntlet to Russia, and see how far Russia will be willing to go to defend its interests in this part of the world.
Well, commenting on that one, I thought it was kind of interesting. Aliyev was in Moscow yesterday and met with Putin. And then there were multiple reports in the press, including Turkish press, that basically put it very mildly, saying that Putin's message to Aliyev was to find a compromise, and great leaders basically find a compromise in situations like this. Usually we've heard such messages to Armenian leaders in the past, and so I was wondering exactly what he means, what these press reports mean. Yeghia?
I read this too, and I think Putin was calling for a mutual compromise. But at this moment, I don't see any compromise from the Azerbaijani side. I mean, the Armenian side cannot, because it already done a lot of compromises, and it still is compromising. But from the Azerbaijani side, because there's this appetite in order to control more, to gain gold, because they are thirsty, they are the same euphoria that we had in the mid-1990s, now Azerbaijan had. I remember that we were talking that we're gonna reach Baku, we'll take Nakhichevan, and so on. So now Azerbaijan is in the same euphoria that they want to so-called liberate Western Zangezur and even go to Yerevan and Sevan. So this euphoria exists, and also it seems that psychologically Aliyev is preparing the people for a new war, because the issue of when it comes to the Zangezur corridor, actually there is no such thing as Zangezur corridor in the November 9 trilateral statement.
That's right.
But Azerbaijan, within the state media and also in or even the opposition media, is trying to enforce or trying to provide this narrative, and also trying to draw a parallel or comparison with the Lachin corridor, saying that if the Armenians gained a certain special status for Lachin, that the Azerbaijani should also gain special status in Zangezur or Sunik. I think the latest Azerbaijani incursion or encroachment can be summarized in 2 points. First is to pressure Armenia in order to open road via Sunik to the Azerbaijans, and the second is imposing one-sided peace treaty on Armenia, because Azerbaijan is aware that today Armenia is weak under Pashinyan. The army is weak. We have lost a lot of not just human resources but also material resources.
Right.
When it comes to tanks and everything. So Azerbaijan, I think, is doing its best in order to impose Armenia to exchange the ex-slaves and ever make a border demarcation.
I completely agree with you with your assessment of where Azerbaijan is. It's completely high on its victory and trying to maximize its profit and gains. But over the last week or so, we've heard from Antony Blinken, the U.S. Secretary of State. We've heard from the Europeans. And they've actually put 2.6 billion euros into, what they're thinking. And also Putin saying, this is the time to find a compromise. I personally feel that there's a message being sent to Baku that this is as much as you are going to get. So sit down and start talking how you're going to make the peace. Pietro?
Definitely.
I think definitely, and I think that there is an effort to kind of, put Aliyev in his place. But the other part of the problem is that, Turkey is encouraging Aliyev. And on top of that, it's not clear, when we say, you can't go any farther, Aliyev, sit down and take what you have. Erdogan is not happy with how much he currently has. He wants, more influence for Turkey, for Turkey's sake. But also I think that the other thing I want to mention is that Azerbaijan, coming off this war, was not expecting to do as good as he even did. And now, with the victory of Pashinyan on the election, because they thought, Armenia under Pashinyan, you gave us so much. Yeah. Territory, POWs, the whole 9 yards. Mm-hmm. Now that Pashinyan has won re-election, they think, well, now is the right time. Now is the time to take more.
Yes.
So, like you say, they're readying their people for war, for a second war.
Well, they're thinking that this is a time after the elections where, because he's got, at least he claims that he has a mandate, that this is the time when what he says will go. So if they can get him to make the compromises right now, that's going to be law everywhere, right?
And I also think something else I want to mention is that when Putin is telling Aliyev to compromise, I think that the Russians deep down want to have a restoration of the balance of power there. Right now, they are dealing with a problem that they realized really in the days after the November statement, that you have now a situation where you don't have a balance between Armenia and Azerbaijan. You have an Azerbaijan that's very high and an Armenia that's down.
And it's different from the 90s because there's so much backing from Turkey for Azerbaijan. So I think Russia is in a weak position at present.
Yeah, and they have to find a way to rectify that. And I don't know how you do that. They have to figure out something, because right now with Pashinyan in power in Armenia, if they had a partner in Yerevan, it would make things much easier. But Pashinyan is not that reliable.
Yeah, like I said, I'm hearing a lot of support and a common message coming out of the OSCE countries. Like I said earlier, both the United States, Europe, and Putin have given a consistent message. I am not sure, basically, that Pashinyan is ready to defend the country right now. We need to help ourselves, right, before we can be helped.
As long as he keeps his authority in Armenia, he can compromise on anything.
The current issues in Yerevan, I'm not sure what we're doing to defend ourselves quite yet.
Until now, we have defended ourselves, but at the same time, there were photos and videos from the Azerbaijani side that they advanced few meters or few kilometers, maybe. The problem is that because Yerevan is very close to Declaration, and according to the Soviet maps, Declaration was an Soviet Azerbaijani ex-slave. So my concern or my fear is that Azerbaijan would do its best in order to advance very deep and take the Karachen. And according to the international law, Azerbaijan could have justified its actions by saying that, I'm just liberating or taking or capturing my lands. And the second step would be the same scenario repeated in Davush, because there are many ex-slaves, Azerbaijani or Soviet Azerbaijani ex-slaves within the territories of Armenia. So this is my fear and concern. It's not about just few bordering areas. It's about strategic areas, because actually through the Karachen connects Sunik to Yerevan. And also through Davush we have the second road that connecting Armenia to Georgia that passes through the 7 villages or the ex-slaves through Davush. So these areas are very strategic. That is why actually the European Union is funding alternative routes. Maybe out of concern that if one day Azerbaijan captures these areas, its investment, especially coming from the North-South corridor, which is an Indian and European initiative, will not be endangered.
Yeah. And also, I mean, on top of that, if they succeed in disrupting that connection with Tigran to the south, that also, cuts off not only Sunik, but also Vayazor. So those two provinces alone, they would be completely cut off, and it would enable Aliyev to move on those areas. So they have to be very, very concerned about that. I mean, it's a very, very serious situation right now.
Well, let me ask the question then. Are Azerbaijan and Turkey preparing for a new war against Armenia and Artsakh? As simple as that, Pietro?
Yes, I think that they are preparing for a new military conflict against Armenia and Artsakh, and I think that the Armenians need to be extremely prepared for this, and I think that Russia also too should be very much prepared for this. And also, not only that, Artsakh too. So we talk a lot about, there's been a lot of discussion about Artsakh, how much sovereignty does it have, how much agency does it have. There's still a government in Artsakh, and there's still political leadership there. Will that leadership come up and assert itself? Because if Armenia does not defend its interests, I think Artsakh will. And it has to, the question comes down to, will, Armenia, Artsakh, Russia, and also Iran, frankly, because Iran has a stake in this game too, will they be able to hold off Turkey and Azerbaijan from, advancing into this area?
Pietro, you've talked about this before. Would Artsakh deal with Russia directly without Armenia in the middle?
I think that it depends on who the leader is. I think if it's Balasanyan, I think definitely he would do that. And so I think it depends on the leadership in Artsakh, but I think for sure, definitely, if they feel Yerevan is not coming to their defense, they will step up to the plate and defend themselves at some point.
Yeghia, your thoughts about whether Azerbaijan and Turkey are preparing a new war or just rhetoric?
Yeah, let's assume a very, very bad scenario that the conflict happens in Ukraine and at the same time ISIS is at the roads of Central Asia or at the gate of Central Asia. And conflict arises in Artsakh or Armenia. Which is more important to Russia? First, let's ask.
Yes.
So definitely that is why I'm saying that we have to rely on ourselves. The same as we did in 1918. 1918, the Iranians, the Europeans and the Russians, they didn't help us. Okay, there were no drones during back time, so I cannot make a comparison. But at least we have to prepare for the people that the sky is not pink, the angels are not laughing, the elephants are not walking in the streets. So it's not a pinky and colorful days that we are living in. Definitely we are heading for a clash, and it's not just in South Caucasus, but also in the Middle East, and all these regions are interconnected to each other. So we have to prepare for the worst scenario so that we can have a plan A and B for the good scenarios. Definitely Azerbaijan and Turkey will try to take actions, whether that is a war or a small military operations in the border in order to make pressure. But my concern also comes from the fact that we have demographic problem in these bordering areas, whether in Sunik, in Kegarkunik and other. So the more Azerbaijan is trying to destabilize the region, the more I'm afraid that people actually will leave these regions. We live away from these regions. That is why bringing investments in these regions is crucial, and not just bringing investments in Yerevan and in Kumri and so on. So we have to invest in these regions, which were unfortunately abandoned in the last 30 years at least.
Yeah, I think that part of the European 2.6 billion was going to be earmarked for the south, so that was very nice. But as far as Artsakh goes, can Armenia defend Artsakh? For example, can Pashinyan even visit Artsakh today? Yeah.
I think it's very difficult because from Azerbaijani side, this will be a provocative step. I mean, last time he visited, he said Artsakh is Armenia and full stop. Mm-hmm. So what will he say when he visits Stepara again? If the people will, I don't think the people will welcome him.
Yeah.
So that will be a very provocative step from the Azerbaijani perspective.
Pietro, any last words?
Well, I think, again, as I said last time, the Armenians, if they want to, they can defend their interests. And I think that they will be able to in this time of need. But it depends, again, on leadership.
Yeah.
It depends on, if, Pashinyan is there. And also it depends on if Pashinyan, let's say he's not there, if he's not willing to, if he's unwilling or unable to rectify or help the situation for Armenia, then will others step up and, represent Armenian interests, without him? There could even be a scenario where Artsakh represents Armenian interests without Pashinyan.
I absolutely remember, Pietro, that one of the last times that you were on the show, I asked you if the future of Armenia is bright, and you said that the future will be bright if the Armenians want it to be bright.
Yes, and actually, who said that originally also was Hovik. Hovik mentioned that as well. So yeah. I have to give credit where credit is due and mention him as well, because I don't want to kind of just let that go.
All right.
But yeah, definitely. It's up to the Armenians at the end of the day.
Well, there's always more to discuss, but we're going to break off here for now. This is a good place. Thank you, gentlemen. I appreciate the time you've spent with us. Talk to you again soon, I hope.
Thank you. Merci.
Thank you.
Merci, Shah.
Thank you.
That concludes this week's conversation on Grung. We look forward to your feedback, including your suggestions for conversation topics in the future. Contact us on our website at grung.org, that's GROONG, or on our Facebook page, ANN-Grung, or in our Facebook group, Grung-Armenian News Network. Special thanks to Lara Osborne for providing the music for our podcast. I'm Hovik Manucharyan, and on behalf of everyone in this episode, I wish you a good week. Thank you for listening, and talk to you soon.